Hello everybody, welcome to the Daily Sip. My name is Oliver and my mission is to bring you closer to organic Japanese green tea, and today what we're gonna dive into is a cold brew versus a hot brew of the same tea. So what I want to dive into is actually a tea which was presented to us as the ultimate cold brew, but I want to brew it hot and see actually what the taste difference of the same tea with these two different brewing styles is. And for this I brought today with me the Shizuku Sencha from the Nuruku family. So what you can see is actually that this is a sencha which is slightly sprinkled with matcha. So what we know is that this is a fukamushi, so a deep steamed sencha, so longer steamed sencha. Around 1 hour, 1 minute and 15 seconds instead of 45 seconds. And what we know as well is that it is a shaded tea, so a little bit sweeter tea. Shading makes the tea a little bit sweeter. These are the last 10 days before the harvest that this tea is shaded, and actually this then renders the tea more sweet due to the fact that it contains in the end more theanine, more amino acids, which are the sweeter compounds, and less of the catechins, which are more the astringent compounds in the green tea or in the tea leaves. But what we also have in it is matcha. So it's kind of a, maybe you have seen the names sencha iri matcha. This is exactly this. So it means that it has been, sencha has been mixed with matcha, and this matcha has been shaded for 20 days. So, and then in the blending of the tea is brought together once from the side of the leaf and on the other hand the matcha. And what we know as well is that the leaves actually are themselves also blend. So it's a blend of the Asanoka, it's a blend of the Yabukita, most famous green tea type or cultivar in Japan. Then we have the Asatsuyu and we have the Yuta Kamidori, which is very, very prominent and very famous in the south of Japan. And this is actually where this tea is from. So geographically, when we move into Japan, we go further to the south. We go to the region of Kagoshima, which is on the main island Kyushu. And in Kyushu is the region of Chiran, which is quite a famous region for Japanese green tea. And this is actually where the Nuruki family, or the family which produces this tea, is situated. And they actually were welcoming Agnese and Will when they visited the farm. And what we received, or what they received by them, was actually a cold brew from this Shizuku Sencha. So what they said is that it is the ultimate cold brew for them. It has a very, very good consistency. Often when you take a tea which is used for a cold brew, you tend to use either rather a little bit astringent tea, which then are a little bit fresher, which then are a little bit more citrusy in their notes, and then a little bit more refreshing, or you use a little bit sweeter tea, and in this case we are talking about a little bit of a sweeter tea, due to the fact that this tea is made in Fukamushi style, or the deep steamed style, is actually rendering the tea leaf sweeter, especially in the first brewing, and then just gives this to the tea water, mixing in often a little bit of these cucumbery notes, but also the matcha, which then himself gives in a little bit more of this more vegetable, straightforward kind of spinachy or edamame tones to the taste of the tea itself. So it's quite an interesting mix, which is also seen on other farms. So the Nuruki family in Chiran is absolutely not the only one doing this, but we found this organic green tea, CHAS certified, is actually a good thing for introducing into our assortment. But here I really want to go in the taste difference of this Sencha Iri or Shizuku Sencha. On the one hand cold brewed, and on the other hand hot brewed. So what I brought with me, clearly the two comparing glasses. Then I have the Kyusu, which I'm using for this tea. And what I did in beforehand is actually I cold brewed this tea already. So what you can see is that this tea has down here the tea leaves. So this is just normal what happens when you cold brew the tea. What I added in, but they melted already, is 4 ice cubes, and additionally I let it sit then for 30 minutes. Now we are maybe at 35, so this tea here has been sitting for 35 minutes. The beauty about cold brewing green teas, on the one hand, you can leave it in for a longer time, so you can also brew overnight. There's absolutely no problem with that. As of, I would say, 20 minutes, the tea develops already a nice taste. Overnight, it can really complexify a little bit more. Here I'm taking 35 minutes of brewing and adding in some ice cubes to really have a very cold brew. And this is more or less it. Super simple to do. If you have one of these bottles with the built-in filter, that's always a good one. So there's a silicone. What's good, it also has a silicone closing. So when you put it into the fridge, it actually takes off on no odors or anything. So it's actually quite a good bottle which you can use to store the tea in your fridge. If you're only taking green tea, try to consume it within 1 day. Maybe you can go to 2 days. If you want to conserve it a little bit longer and you want to drink it over several days, add in some lemon juice, because this is actually a natural conservative product, which then gives a little bit more of lifespan to the tea, and it adds in a little bit of vitamin C too. So there are actually 2 positive effects. But now going back to the topic, here I have 5 grams of the Shizuku Sencha. So again, just to see how this tea is actually consistent, or what this tea is consisting of. So we have the beautiful tea leaves, but we see they're a little bit brighter, a little bit powdery, and this is really coming from the matcha powder. Makes it a little bit more pale. My finger gets a little bit more green when I touch the leaves. So these are the residues of the matcha powder. So it's not kind of as you can see when I move away the tea leaves, there's no kind of massive amount of matcha there, just a little bit finely kind of sprinkled tea leaves, and like that they become, or they get this color. And what I will do is that I will now brew 5 grams of this tea. So you see there's a little bit of powder floating around now. So a very, very slight amount of matcha powder. They don't have, there doesn't have to be too much. And we're gonna just brew this for 45 seconds, because the Fukamushi tea, actually you can brew it for 45 seconds and then it's already done. That's the beauty of it, because the tea leaves, they get a little bit more smaller. They maybe, as you might have seen, they are a little bit more, nearly a little bit more dusty. But this is not a negative sign. It's just due to the fact that thanks to the Fukamushi or deep steaming, actually the cell membranes, they break down and you have a little bit more of a brittle tea. This is just something which is a specific part, or kind of a specific or specificity of the Fukamushi tea itself. Good. So what I'm expecting here is a very intense, strong green brewing, like we have with the cold brew here. And let's go. Now we have these 45 seconds, so let's give it a go. And we see also the intense green color of the hot brew, bringing out all of the tea. So very important when you are brewing the tea, look that at the bottom there is no water in, so it should be really clean. The reason is that we don't have any post brewing or after brewing of the tea, which can render it then a little bit more stringent. And we're just gonna add in some cold brew. So you can reuse this as well. Sometimes I use 2 to 3 times. And we already see the first difference. So when I move this here, so what we already can see, and it's not due to the shadow of this first glass, it's really that this here is much more intense in terms of the depth of the green. Here we see a little bit more milky, and this is often a sign, what I can see is that especially when you do cold brews, but it also happens with for example with gyokuro, which is very high in amino acids. that you get a little bit more of a milky texture of the tea water itself. Here it's quite intense green. I'm expecting a little bit more of chlorophyll, so a little bit more of maybe a greener taste, and there are also a little bit more catechins released, so it might be that there's a slight tone of astringency, but it must not be. But that's just from a visual aspect of these two tea what I'm getting by just comparing them. Good. So now let's dive directly into it, into the taste. I think I start with the hot brew. Also in terms of smell, so I get quite a lot of edamame smell with this tea, a little bit of fruity. I get a little of pear. Yeah, so a slight kind of pineapple. A little bit of pineapple tones, a little bit of sweet corn when we smell this, now the cold brew. So much fresher. We get a little bit of cucumber. Not as sweet actually in terms of kind of the smell of the tea. It's normal that the tea which has the hot water is also the steam which is coming up. It's much easier for my nose to absorb and to decomplexify a little bit the taste or the smell. It seems a little bit more, kind of nearly a little bit more milky, but all in all, I would say here, clearly due to the hot steam also, a little bit more complex, a little bit more in the fruity, here a little bit more in the cucumbery, refreshing tones. But now let's go into the taste of the tea. If you ever did a cold brew, in general, it's just a super refreshing beverage, especially with green tea. You get a lot of this cucumber tone. I get a little bit of fresh spinach. There's a slight hint of umami, so a little bit these slight savory notes, but still super refreshing. More kind of in this, as I said before, cucumber, fresh spinach, a little bit edamame space, so very strong in this aspect. Decent, no astringency, no citrusy notes, so there's not this kind of astringent tones which you sometimes even refer to as bitter tones with the green tea. So here definitely we have a very refreshing beverage we are getting from the cold brew, but not moving too much into the super sweet parts. So if I compare this, for example, to a cold brew of a gyokuro, of a karigane, which is just the stem tea or the high grade stem tea of a gyokuro, there we actually getting a lot of kind of these theanine notes, dry, or kind of they show themselves as very sweet, very dense. I believe also that the add-on of the matcha powder just gives this tea a little bit more of this greener edamame, spinachy and cucumbery tones, and not so much of this intense sweet. There's a slight savory tone, there's a slight kind of umami tone which is with the tea, but it's very, very decent and just lingering a little bit in the background. Good, now to the hot brew. Already in the beginning, it's super different. So just when the water touches my palate and touches the top of my tongue, what I get is already a little bit more of refreshing tones. But here we are kind of in this cucumbery refreshment. Here a little bit more of a citrusy. So what the hot water does, and this was exactly what I saw before here, is a little bit more of a sweeter and rounder tones. Here I get a little bit more of these citrusy tones, a little bit kind of fresher tones. There's a little bit of a tingling on top of my tongue. So it is in this aspect already different, that first here you have this calm refreshment, I would say. It's kind of this refreshing cucumber, very decent refreshment. Here directly there's more energy, there's a little bit of a tingling, there are more citrusy notes. So already in the first in the first tasting of this tea, there's quite a big difference. Now let's try and dive into a little bit the other notes of this tea. What I definitely also have more is the umami, kind of this savory flavor profile. And I must admit, there's a slight twist. It's not a sour note, but there's a little bit a mix of these citrus tones moving into the umami notes, but it gives it a little bit kind of a slight decent sourish notes, which you maybe if you ever had a pisco sour or something in that direction, it's just a small hint. It's not very strong, but there's just a small tingling of this. So it plays much more in these umami notes. It plays much more in kind of this citrusy mix. So there actually the tea differs a lot. So we are moving a little bit more into this also edamame, a little bit green notes. So in comparison, when we take another Fukamushi style tea, which is not sprinkled with matcha, here we get much more greener tones out of it. And that's very beautiful. There is, and this also I realized once I had genmaicha, which was sprinkled with matcha too. So this is the tea which is with the roasted rice grains together with bancha, and there was a little bit of matcha in, and I got there a little bit kind of a small hint of sourness with it. And I think it's the combination. This must be kind of a reaction a little bit between the tea leaves and the matcha itself, which gives it a little bit this special twist. And this I only get from this kind of tea, or which I have observed only with this kind of tea. But nevertheless, it's a very nice kind of a green. You have a little bit more of this edamame, but also showing much more in comparison to the cold brew, much more these notes of the savoriness and a little bit the citrusiness. So it's a tea which kind of shows much more its energy. You also know that with the 60 degrees Celsius water, or no, 70 degrees Celsius I used here, so 165 Fahrenheit. And here I definitely get much more of an energy kick, and I think that might be a reason that I like the hot green tea better in the morning. It is super refreshing, and it's a little bit of a pick-me-up when you cold brew it, but you definitely get it in a stronger way from the hot beverage. Try not to go too hot. If you go to 80 or 90 degrees Celsius, so between 175 and 200 Fahrenheit, there definitely this tea will turn more stringent. And I already feel it a little bit that 70 might be the highest temperature, so the 165 Fahrenheit, 70 degrees Celsius. If I go down, I could push it a little bit in the direction of the cold brew, but definitely this tea should be brewed between 60 and 70 degrees Celsius or 140 and 165 Fahrenheit. But it's still very beautiful in terms of its taste. It's just showing much more of, as I said before, this umami flavor profile. It's a little bit more of a citrusy, and it shows a little bit more of complexity. When I take again now a cold brew, much more refreshing, a little bit more of cucumbery notes, also a little bit these edamame notes, a little bit of this kind of savory notes, but here it's much more developed in this region, and kind of this cucumbery refreshment goes away. But let me just have a swirl here. And I want to try it again. Maybe it's a little bit stronger now. So I'm actually at the lower end, so at the lower end of brewing this cold brew. So if you leave it overnight, it will definitely intensify. And it intensifies a little bit, so it gets a little bit strong in its greener note, a little bit more in its spinachy note, but still very strong in these cucumber refreshing tones. A little bit more of sweet corn. Let's take a second brewing of this one here. Finish the first. And as you can see, very short steeping of the second brewing. Let's go. So there's even a little bit more of citrusy notes coming in. So there's kind of the umami flavor is a little bit diminishing. This is something normal. I think there's quite a good extraction normally in the first brewing. That's why often you see that Japanese green teas are a little bit sweeter, a little bit stronger on the savory flavor profile, so sweet savory profile, fruity profiles, and then it moves a little bit more into a greenish and a little bit more of citrusy tones. So what happens with now with the longer brewing time with the cold brew is that it moves a little bit more in these fresh greener tones, but the citrus notes, astringent notes, anything is there. So it's a really soft, very smooth and refreshing tea. And here we get much more of kind of this citrusy tone in the beginning, moving over into slight edamame notes. There's still some savory notes around, but it's much more refreshing. So it moves a little bit more in the refreshing, but in the kind of energetic, refreshing tones, which I circle around the citrusy notes, a little bit, maybe a little bit of pomegranate. So there is a little bit more this direction where this tea goes. Meanwhile, the cold brew really stays in these kind of refreshing, calmer tones. And it is just differentiating in terms of what you're looking for. If you're looking for something very refreshing in the morning, calm, kind of pick-me-up way, then cold brew definitely a good thing. I think I will still stay with the hot brew, because the hot brew is just a little bit more of energetic, a little bit stronger pick-me-up feeling for myself. Also the hot water kind of gives more, seems more kind of have a wake-up call into my body. So then I really feel like the energy is kind of transmitting much faster from the tea brewing to my body. But that's my personal opinion. Let me know what you think. Have you ever tried it? Please, if you have never done the cold brewing, super easy to do. You can even leave it overnight and then see for yourself if you like it. Try to use maybe a fukamushi deep steam tea, maybe a gyokuro, so high theanine tea, high mineral tea. And if you want to go for a hot brew, then any kind of green tea is great. You can go for the fukamushi, which I took here, or you can also go for a normal asamushi, so lighter steamed. And there you even get the citrusy note, a little bit of floral notes more, but this something that definitely will come with a more serious we will do here. But I hope you like this one here. Try it out for yourself. See you the next time. Thank you and bye-bye.